So I'd like to welcome everyone to All Things Icelandic, the first installment in a series of online presentations featuring everything of interest to those who love Iceland. All Things Icelandic is a new initiative of the Icelandic National League of North America. It will feature regular presentations or interviews on a variety of topics: travel and tourism, cinema and the sagas, business and public affairs. We really do plan to explore all things Icelandic, whether here in North America, over in Iceland, or anywhere around the world. I'm your host, Stefan Jonasson, the president of the Icelandic National League of North America, and I would like to welcome our first guest in this series, Ambassador Pétur Ásgeirsson, who has been Iceland's representative to Canada since November 1st, 2017, when he and his wife, Jóhanna Gunnarsdóttir, a lawyer by profession, arrived in Ottawa. The ambassador joined the Icelandic Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1999 and was previously Consul General in Greenland, which is Iceland's nearest neighbor. And so with that short introduction, again, welcome, Ásgeir. And let's launch right into the questions. You and your wife Jóhanna came to Ottawa from Greenland. Was that a great change for you? And how have you enjoyed your life and work so far in Ottawa?
Mm-hmm. Well, before we start, Stefan, I would like to thank you for inviting me, and of course say good afternoon to all of you who are joining us today. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be the first guest on All Things Icelandic. So thank you for that. Yeah, we came to Canada directly from Greenland, and as you can imagine, that was a bit of a change for us. I had been Director for Administration in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs for 14 years before going to Greenland. And as such, I went there to establish a new consulate in Nuuk. And I had done that many times before in other places, among them in Ottawa and Winnipeg, just after I started working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I keep losing contact here. Yep, right, I'm back. So when I came to Winnipeg and Ottawa those 10 years ago, I immediately started thinking this would be a great place for me when I get older to be a diplomat in this country, in Canada. And so it was a long time dream to come here, but almost 20 years later, 14 years later, I went to Greenland to do the same thing. And as soon as I got there, I understood that it would be a great adventure to be Consul General, the first Icelandic Consul General to be stationed in Greenland. So when I got home, I went to the minister and kind of suggested myself as the first consul there.
Okay.
And it was a great adventure to be in Greenland, and we enjoyed every day of it. It's so different to be to live in an Arctic town like Nuuk. Nuuk is a little town of 18,000 people. But moving to Ottawa from Nuuk is like moving from a small Arctic town, which is, nice Arctic town, but to a big city like Ottawa. And in fact, a bigger city that we had ever lived in before. Because, I mean, the comparison between Reykjavik and Ottawa is also quite stark, So, but, we've been here now almost 4 years, and we have really loved it. I mean, the Ontario and Canada is just such a nice place to live, and we've enjoyed every day of it.
So Just a quick side question about Nuuk. Is there still a lot of Danish influence in Greenland, or is Greenland really emerging as a nation unto itself?
Well, they have like home rule or self-rule, as they call it now, and but there is still quite a bit of influence. But they have their own government, they have their own parliament, so they are step by step coming nearer to thinking about independence. But it's difficult in Greenland. The Danes have done a great job to support the country, but and I mean the national language is Greenlandic. They speak Greenlandic. They teach Greenlandic in schools up to high school.
Okay.
Then it's Danish university and high school is still taught in Danish. So yes, there's still a lot of Danish influence there.
Okay, but it is in a sense a national capital, and so you went from one national capital to a much larger one.
Well, in a way, it's a national capital. I mean, the ambassador of Iceland to Greenland sits in Copenhagen.
Okay.
And that is why I was the Consul General there rather than an ambassador. Although I already had, the ambassador title when I went to Greenland, but I could not use it in Greenland because Nuuk is not essentially a national capital.
Okay. Okay. I just want to pause for a minute to remind people to mute themselves, and also if you think of questions as we go along, we hope to have a brief question and answer period at the end, and so you can just type your questions into the chat, and we'll go to those questions towards the end of the interview. But back to Ambassador Pétur. I read somewhere that you did a lot of boating while you were in Greenland. Well, tell us a bit about boating in Greenland, but I'm also curious to know if you've had an opportunity to enjoy Canada's wonderful waterways as well.
Yeah, well, when I went to Greenland, I had no experience of boating, except that I had some experience of boat building. But as soon as I got there, I understood that having your own boat is key to getting to know Greenland, because there are no roads. The only way to get around is by plane, helicopter, or by your own boat. And the best way to do it is to go by your own boat. So soon after we got there, we bought a boat that was big enough to stay on board, to, live on board. And I did with my son 2 extensive journeys in 2 summers. One southward to all the way to Nordic in South Greenland, which is like the heart of the Norse, or what I would call Icelandic community 1,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we sailed around and we visited all the sites of the Icelandic people that lived there at the time. So that was very interesting. And we were lucky enough to go with friends of ours, Greenlandic family that had a similar boat, and they were actually doing a documentary on Greenland for the state. So we had to go to all the interesting places. So it was very lucky for us. And the next summer we again traveled with the same family northwards. First to Disco Bay area, to Ilulissat, where my wife met with us. She flew up to Ilulissat from Nuuk and stayed there a couple of days with us, enjoying and experiencing the ice fields of Ilulissat, mm-hmm. where huge icebergs are breaking off the Greenlandic glacier, and it's just a wonderful experience to be able to sail around them. You have to be careful though. And from there we went on north all the way up to this town called Uummannaq, which is just about the nicest town I've ever been to. It's undescribably beautiful town on a mountain also called Umanak, and Umanak means heart-shaped. So it's a romantic place, you know. So that was, you know, that was our experience of boating in Greenland. And in the winter after the second journey, I used my evenings to write a book, because as you know, 1 in 10 Icelanders write a book in their lifetime, so I had to get mine away. So I wrote a book about our trips, and my son, who was at the time studying photography, and did the photographs for the book, and he published it in Iceland. Now, when I understood that my dream of going to Greenland, to Canada would materialize, I decided to take with us the second boat I had built and was building also with my son, which is a 6-meter long sort of classic speedboat, mahogany decked classic speedboat, but it had no engine. So I brought it here without the engine, and I found these wonderful chaps that work on classic boats down in Manotick, Ontario, and they helped me install an engine, and we've spent our summers on the Rideau Canal and trailering the boat around in Ontario and into Quebec, and just had a wonderful time of it. You know, in Canada you can drive everywhere, you know, if you have the time.
Sure.
But seeing the country from a boat is just a completely different experience, and you also get to know lots of the other people who are boating, and it's just a wonderful way to get to know a country, boating.
So there's a greater sense of community and a viewpoint that many people don't experience.
Indeed.
Have you managed to make it to the area around Muskoka yet, where the Icelanders first settled in Ontario? Or
well, I already had something booked for last summer, but we had to cancel it because, well, I won't mention why, but you can all imagine.
Sure.
But that has been our dream. But we've been down to the Thousand Islands area, and you know, a couple of times, and just to several places around here. And I mean, for anybody thinking about moving to Ontario, you should understand that Ontario is a paradise for boaters.
Sure.
Really.
And it sounds like we should, you know, never assume if you've said you've been on a cruise that you weren't behind the wheel of the boat.
Well, we've discussed cruises, and I've always told my wife, I'll only go on a cruise if I can drive.
Sure. I tried to use that explanation on the airlines, but they won't let me fly the planes I go on.
Oh, no.
So these boats you built, where does this interest in woodworking come from? Because boat building is a pretty complicated craft, you know. So was it part of your life growing up, or is this something you stumbled into as an adult?
Well, I've always had an interest in woodworking and furniture making. That has been part of my life ever since I was a young man. But interestingly, this story began in Winnipeg, because when I was there in 2001, my good friend and colleague Neil Bardal, the late Neil Bardal, took me to the Forks area, the market area in Winnipeg. And there I stumbled into a bookstore, and looking around, I found this book on how to build a cedar strip canoe. Of course, I bought the book. I mean, I've always loved the canoe. It had just such a beautiful, beautiful shape. It's an object that is just so charming. So I wanted to build one, not because I wanted to, you know, sail it, but because I wanted to build it. Okay. So I got the plans from a company here in Ontario called Bear Mountain Boats. It's a Prospector 16 feet canoe. And so that started my boat building period, which lasted 8 years and ended with the boat that I brought here. You know, one has to have something to do in the long evenings here in the cold areas in Iceland, Greenland, and Canada.
Sure, sure. I actually come from a family of boat builders down in Landeyar, who, you know, used their winters to build boats and farmed in the summers, and so it. I always marvel, you know, I marvel at the contours of the wood and the fine details of putting a book together or a boat together. And I have to tell you, I've bought 2 or 3 books over the years on boat building, but I've never built one myself.
Right.
So it just shows great initiative on your part, combined with curiosity and obviously a certain amount of skill, because it could be fairly easy to build a boat that didn't float. So
yeah, well, it's just a question of starting and, you know, being careful and patient and not hurry too much. But Stefan, in all fairness, I think you've been kind of busy with other things, haven't you?
Well, maybe I'll use that as an excuse, but it really is an excuse. So moving from boat building to diplomacy, perhaps, how do you see the relationship between Canada and Iceland? You know, for instance, what are the main areas of connection and cooperation? Is the embassy working on furthering the relationship, and what are some of the examples of things that have been done?
Yeah,
that's a big question. Let me break it down. Let's just start with the relationship.
That's fine. I just keep losing Zoom here on my screen, so
Okay.
I have to get it back once in a while. But the relationship between Canada and Iceland is, of course, very, very, very good. We are partners in, and I'm going to mention first the Arctic Council, because we are currently chairing the Arctic Council, and we took over from Canada. And we have worked so closely with Canada, and we are so like-minded when it comes to the Arctic, and work very well together there. The second thing I think I should mention is NATO. As you probably know, Iceland has no military of any kind, and really has never had a military, at least not since the Viking times. So Canada has been one of our neighbors that have helped patrol our airspace, sent missions of planes to Iceland to control our airspace in cooperation with other Nordic countries. So we've had extensive cooperation there. You asked also about what we are doing to further the relationship with Canada, and there are 2 things that I want to mention here. First is that we have approached the Canadian authorities on the topic of a new free trade agreement in cooperation with Norway.
Okay.
The current trade agreement is an EFTA agreement, the European Free Trade Association agreement. But this time around, we're going it with Norway, and we're hoping that we will sit down with Canada quite soon to discuss a new, more modern and more expensive free trade agreement. Now, I also want to mention the youth mobility agreement that the embassy is working on with the authorities here in Ottawa, and it's in the final stages. I hope we will be able to sign that agreement this summer, and it will allow Canadian youth and Icelandic youth to visit the other country and spend up to a year working there. That is not allowed today. You can go as a tourist, but you're not allowed to work. So this agreement will give Icelanders and Canadian work permit in the other country, which just hugely changes the opportunities for young people to get to know, the other.
Sure.
The other country. Yeah.
I mean, that provides wonderful opportunities for young people. I suppose it would be unseemly for me to confess to being a little envious of that, since I'm guessing that my blonde hair is evidence that I wouldn't be allowed in under the program, and it's probably too much to hope that you might develop an exchange program for seniors.
Well, I think you can get pretty far on your beard and your Icelandic, but I'm not sure. It looks like it might be people up to 35 years of age.
Wow.
I am assuming you are a bit above that.
Still, yeah, that still doesn't cover me, but that really, I mean, that kind of cultural exchange where someone can go and actually work in the country for a time, not just go as a visitor or a tourist, makes a tremendous difference. And that's good both for Iceland and for Canada, for young people to be able to participate in that. And probably over the course of time, that will pay off with improved business relationships, educational exchanges, and all manner of deepened connection.
Yeah.
So that's very exciting.
And I'm confident that when we move along from these COVID times, tourism will again flourish in Iceland, and we always need both French and English speakers to work in the tourism industry. So there will be opportunities, I think, for young people to get a job in Iceland. And of course, we've never had much of an unemployment problem, but we do now for the first time. We do have a little bit of an unemployment problem at this time, because tourism is such an important industry in Iceland.
Sure, but once tourism resumes, it's likely going to resume with a vengeance, and and that unemployment will be eradicated quickly.
I think so.
Yeah. Do Canada and Iceland cooperate at all on climate change issues?
Yes, under the Arctic Council, we do, and we have common interests in the Arctic. There's no doubt about it. Both when it comes to fishing in the Central Arctic Ocean, which we're not doing now, but in 2017, Canada and Iceland and other countries signed an agreement on the protection of fish stocks in the Central Arctic Ocean. But the idea behind that agreement is also that we will let the science lead the way. And if it is viable, there is agreement that we will be able to use the resources of the fish stocks in that area. So that's one thing, that's fishing in the Arctic, and of course the preservation of the Arctic. But also shipping in the Arctic. There is already shipping going on, the northeast route down the coast of south the coast of Russia and Norway, and these ships are going past Iceland. And I firmly believe that the northwest shipping route through the Arctic, the Canadian Arctic to the Pacific, to Alaska and the Pacific, will open up in the future. So I'm confident that there are opportunities for Canada and Iceland to cooperate in this field in the future.
And that's a route that Europeans have dreamed about and sought to explore for 500 years.
Especially the English.
Yes, the famous Northwest Passage.
Yeah, indeed.
So among other things, Canada and Iceland actually share not one but two oceans,
Yeah,
the Atlantic and the Arctic, which
yeah.
gives us two connections with one another, perhaps. What do you see? What do the two countries, Canada and Iceland, have in common? And what do you feel about the cultural differences and similarities? Another double-pronged question.
Yeah. Well, I would first like to say that the Canadian society and economy is very similar to the Nordic countries in many ways. These societies are based on the respect for democracy, human rights, rule of law, gender equality. These are all sort of basic concepts that we base our societies on. So this is the greatest and most important sort of likeness between these countries in my view. I mean, we all have relatively high taxes, but we also offer our citizens relatively inexpensive services in healthcare, education, and social services, and so on. So these are the things we have in common. With all due respect to my fellow Icelanders, I might mention that what I first noticed when I got here was that Canadians are a little bit more polite than we are. It might be the Viking background, but we tend to be a little bit more direct, and we don't sugarcoat our opinions so much. Although I guess this is changing a little bit. But comparing with Canada is maybe a little bit unfair, because where can you go where people are nicer and more polite than in Canada? But so this is something I noticed, as soon as I came here. Now I need to mention the weather, because I mean the strange thing is that Ottawa and Reykjavik have just about the same average temperature over the year. The difference, though, is that we stick pretty close to zero, whereas you here in Ontario at least, and you in Winnipeg, go quite high on both each way. So that's a great difference. And I mean, it's interesting to live in Ottawa, because it's like living in a tropical country in the summertime and an Arctic one in wintertime. And I really like that. I really like the seasons and how extreme they are in a way. It's just wonderful.
Whereas I have often had occasion to recommend Reykjavik to people as a winter travel destination if they're leaving the prairies or the upper Midwest, just to get away from the cold. It's nearly as good as Mexico.
Well, that's right.
So, Icelanders and Canadians have a special bond. Why do you think the bond between, and here I'm speaking at the level of people, why do you think the bond is as strong as it is?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. There is a strong bond. I mean, I guess Icelanders have the strongest feelings towards Danish and Norwegians, where we came from in the beginning. But there are two historic reasons why we think very warmly about Canadians and about Canada. I mean, the first one being the fact that Icelanders discovered North America 1,000 years ago, and the first European born here, Snorri Þorfinnsson, was an Icelander. Both his parents were 100% Icelanders. So Icelanders are aware of this, and it gives them a sort of sense of connection. There's no doubt about it. The second and much more important thing is the extensive emigration from Iceland in the latter half of the 19th century, when about 20% of the Icelandic population moved to North America, mostly to Canada. I mean, the idea of New Iceland and the you know, the understanding that there are maybe 100 to 200,000 people of Icelandic descent that live in Canada gives us a sense of connection that is absolutely unique. And I actually think that most, if not all, Icelanders can trace family connection to someone in Canada.
So there is a sense that while our ancestors left home, they clearly weren't forgotten, that they're remembered and still a part of the consciousness of the Icelandic people.
Yes, no doubt about it. I see my cousin Del Svensson, he's sitting there. Hi, Del.
Okay. It is wonderful to have those connections across the ocean and to be able to talk to and about one another's cousins and visit with them. I mean, it has always been a magical experience for me when I have connected with a cousin, however distant, after a generation or two or three generations of separation. It's like it's like the families were never parted.
Yes, and as you know, Stefan, Icelanders think of frændi as, you know, something important, even if it's 7 you know, generations back. If you are somebody's frændi, you have a connection.
Sure. Perhaps that's one of the reasons that Iceland is such a peaceful and non-violent country compared to most places in the world.
Indeed, the most peaceful country in the world.
Yes, year after year, according to reports.
Indeed.
I wonder about business relationships between Canada and Iceland. Is Canada an important trading partner for Iceland, and are there industries here that could benefit from better connection with Iceland, or Icelandic industries that could benefit by expanding into Canada?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. I mean, the two most important for us are the export of marine products. We export about 16,000 tons a year. It doesn't sound like a lot, but these are highly developed products that are expensive. So this is important for the Icelandic economy. And secondly, it's tourism. And for example, in 2018, Canadians were #1 when it came to tourism to Iceland per capita.
Wow.
In you know, overall, Canada is #4 after the US, the UK, and Germany. But per capita, no country sends us more visitors than Canada.
Well, that alone should make us popular, because Iceland, I've been told, has more statistics per capita, or more per capita statistics per capita than any other country in the world. So,
yeah, we love that term. We use it a lot. I hardly make a speech without using the term per capita.
Okay.
I must admit, but a few well, a decade ago or even more, we made an air services agreement with Canada, which gives us access to flights to Canada directly between Iceland and Canada. And Icelandic airlines have been flying to up to 7 cities in Canada. And this is, of course, extremely important and part of the explanation of all these tourists coming from here.
Sure. So if you could allow me a brief commercial break, this might be a good time to point out that the Icelandic National League of North America is planning a tour to Iceland in 2022. And given all of our pent-up tourism desires, and given the importance of Canadian tourism in Iceland, we should be planning on participating in that tour. But it might also be for a good idea for us when we go to Red Lobster or Joey's Fish and Chips. When the waitress comes and asks us what we'd like, we could say, well, I'd like some Icelandic cod or some Icelandic haddock, and just do that as a regular guerrilla initiative to improve the sale of Icelandic fish products in the more popular fish restaurants here.
Yes. You also mentioned, Stefan, industries that could benefit Canada, Icelandic know-how that could benefit Canada, and I will mention 2 or 3 examples. Maybe first, fisheries technologies. When the cod starts coming back on the east coast of Canada, you're going to need state-of-the-art equipment, and we are producing. We are leading that industry in many ways. So I think we could really work together there. Fish farming is another example. We've been very successful with fish farming. And thirdly, I want to mention geothermal energy, because there are several places in Canada where there is warmth in the earth, not high heat areas, but warm enough to really make a difference. And in these times where we need more green energy, I think Canada should really look into using and making benefits of these possibilities. This is in British Columbia, Alberta, and Northwest Territories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, even here on the cold prairies, the Manitoba hydro building is heated partly thermally. You have to go far down. But the ground is warmer than we think under the blanket of snow.
Yeah.
Well, that's all very, very interesting. So there are plenty of opportunities for us to expand our business connections. On another topic, as I think about it, Iceland has had representatives in Manitoba now for, a professional diplomat for 21 years, but we had honorary consuls long before that. So Iceland has had a diplomatic presence in Manitoba for a long time. How do you see the future of representation of Iceland here in Winnipeg and on the prairies?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, as you know, Iceland became an independent country in 1918 and became a republic in 1944. But the Danes handled our foreign affairs until 1941. And we today have around maybe 230 honorary consuls around the world. But you know where the first one was? In Winnipeg. In 1942, we appointed the first honorary consul, and that was in Winnipeg.
Okay.
And I sometimes have a bit of a problem with the distinction between an honorary consul and a career consul. You said a professional. I would never have called Neil Bardal not professional. He was the most professional diplomat I ever met. But the first career diplomat to be sent to Manitoba was the late Bev Arason-Gaudet, who recently passed away, and that was in 1999 that he went there. And So it's been a very successful post there, and only one of 4 of consulates with career consulates we have. Just have Faroe Islands, Greenland, New York, and Winnipeg.
Okay.
Only 4 consulates. And I think there is great support for the consulate in Winnipeg, and I have no information of any ideas about any changes there. So I think it will be there for a long time yet.
Of course, we just had the good fortune of welcoming Gudmundur Arni Stefansson as the new Consul General here, and I know everyone is looking forward to the period when we get beyond the crisis that shall not be named, so that he can get out and about in our communities.
Indeed, and I mean he was carefully chosen. Guðmundur used to be a member of the government, and he was ambassador to the United States and to Sweden and to India. So, I mean, very high-ranking diplomat.
Sure. What are the just for people who may not understand them, what are the key differences between an embassy and a consulate?
Oh dear. Well,
maybe that's too long a question, although it was only one sentence.
No, I'll try to answer it quickly. I mean, an ambassador represents the head of state towards another head of state. So I represent the government and the head of state of Iceland towards Canada as a whole, all the provinces, the whole of Canada. And my duties cover everything that diplomats can cover, whereas consuls and embassies are always in capitals. They can only be in capitals.
Right.
Consulates and consuls can be wherever, as long as the state in question accepts it. And consuls, their task is to assist Icelanders and Icelandic companies in whatever, wherever their need is. But they are not there to handle political issues with the authorities or the governments.
Okay. And they also, I mean, in the case of the Consulate General here in Winnipeg, it is like a mission to the Icelandic community in North America.
Indeed, I mean that is the reason why we have that consul there. I mean, only United States and Iceland have a consul there, a professional consulate in
Sure.
Winnipeg.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now
next you might ask me, what's the difference between an honorary consul and the other kind of consul? The task is the same. The only difference is that we pay Guðmundur, we don't pay the honorary.
Right. And I think Neil Bardal was so busy as the honorary consul general before Svavar arrived that I'm sure he actually welcomed the thought that somebody would be paid to do the work that he had done so lovingly, as his predecessors before him, Grettir Leo Johansson and others.
Indeed, yeah.
Headed to more than just Canada. So you're also the ambassador to some countries in Central and South America.
Yes.
So does that take up a lot of your time, or?
No, it doesn't really. I mean, I have only visited 2 of them, only Panama and Costa Rica, and then came COVID. So no, but it's out of the question. You cannot spend much time on more than Canada relations.
Sure, but there's still you're still their contact when they need to be in touch with Iceland.
Yes, indeed, and we have consuls in all of these countries. It's 6 countries that have consuls there, and I'm in contact with them, and sort of, yeah.
Okay, so it is it's a big assignment.
It is.
Here, the Nordic countries as a whole, you know, the countries beyond Iceland, beyond even Scandinavia, but the whole group of Nordic countries seem to have a very special bond. Why is that? And do the Nordic embassies here work closely together in Canada?
Yes, indeed. And the Nordic countries have a very strong bond for which we've had for hundreds of years, and the bond can be explained by cultural reasons. I mean, we all used to speak the same language, which you know, only Icelanders speak today. The Icelandic language is very similar to the old Viking Norse language. So there's this cultural background that we share, except for Finland. The Finnish speak a different language, but so we work very closely together, and we have two institutions that are very important to our cooperation: the Nordic Council of Parliamentary Cooperation and the Nordic Council of Ministers. And the ambassadors or the embassies here in Ottawa, we work very closely together. We speak every week, and we have projects together. This is, you know, we've sort of stepped this up in recent times, because we understood that together we are much stronger and yield more benefits than each of us going it alone. And our cooperation led us in 2018 to apply for a grant from the Nordic Council of Ministers to hold a cultural Arctic, not Arctic, but arts event here in Canada. And our suggestion was to have a year-long event that would take place all over Canada, in cities all over Canada. And we were competing with 27 countries, 27 capitals around the world, and Canada was chosen. So we are now working with the Harbourfront Centre in Toronto, and this event was supposed to be this year, but it will be in 2022, and it's called Nordic Bridges. And the idea is to build a bridge between the Nordic countries and Canada, and introduce our culture and our arts to Canadians.
Sure. What I mean, that sounds very exciting, and it gives us something to look forward to. The literal people among us, of course, may start to think that you know, if they think too much about the bridge, knowing how Iceland builds tunnels everywhere, they might make the mistake of thinking that they'll be able to drive to Iceland soon. But I suppose we'll need to wait for a tunnel for that.
Actually, since you mentioned that, I warned my colleagues that the word bridges can mean something else in English.
Oh, yes, yes. But it sounds like a really exciting initiative, and we'll all be looking for it as it rolls out, and plan to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it will come to Winnipeg. Okay,
so to maybe circle back and become a little more personal again. When the pandemic, I wasn't going to mention that word, but when it's over, are there any particular places in Canada that you'd like to visit while you're here as ambassador?
Well, of course, I would very much like to experience Íslendingadagurinn one more time. I and my wife really enjoy coming for Íslendingadagurinn, and it's just such a wonderful event. Apart from that, I really want to go to Lanzo Meadows and, you know, see the birthplace of Snorri.
Yes.
And it's a shame that I have not been able to do that before, but I really hope to do that before I leave. The third place I I'd mention sort of off the top of my head is Vineyard, Saskatchewan, of course, Regina, but I would make a side trip to go to Vineyard because my great-grandmother is buried there.
Ah.
And I would really like to go and you know, show my respect and visit her tombstone there.
It is a marvelous community. I had the privilege for 2 decades of preaching once a year in the brick church in Wynyard. Every summer I would go back and preach at a summer service there. It is a wonderful town and still a vibrant Icelandic community there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, it's an active and energizing place. And Lanso Meadows, I need to warn you, there is nowhere, perhaps other than Hecla Island, there's nowhere in Canada where I have gone where when I stepped out of the car and began walking around, I felt like I was back in Iceland. Mm-hmm. There is a feel to the landscape that seems very familiar, and you can understand why the Icelanders might have chosen to try to settle there.
Right.
It feels perfectly Icelandic to walk through the nature of Lanso Meadows.
Yeah, well, they call it Wineland, so they must have found some tempting berries over there.
I don't know if they have tempting berries, but there is Newfoundland screech. Right. And it's worth a shot of screech and kissing the cod while you're there.
But Stefan, since you mentioned Hecla Island, I have been there with and had dinner at the hotel in Hecla Island and with some Western Icelandic friends, and it was one of the most memorable afternoons of my life. And especially the way back when we started talking about Njálsaga, because I found that they all spoke about Gunnar and Njáll like they were old friends.
Sure, which is perfectly Icelandic. One always needs to be careful having a casual conversation in Iceland that the person being spoken about didn't actually die 7 to 11 centuries ago.
Indeed.
How does serving in the Icelandic Foreign Service affect a diplomat's family life? Maybe this is too personal, but it would seem to me that it has an impact on spouses' careers and not to mention children growing up. How does it affect family life? And how often do you get home to Iceland?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it does affect family life. There's no question about that. You leave Iceland and you leave your friends and your family behind. We left it late to go on a posting abroad, and that was by design. We wanted our sons to grow up in Iceland, and my wife also had her career as a family law specialist in the Ministry of Justice in Iceland. So we left it late. So it's been easy on us. I mean, our sons have enjoyed visiting us both here and in Greenland. We have 2 sons. Mm-hmm. We go home like about once a year or maybe twice. But at least for Christmas, we usually go home for Christmas. Although we had one Christmas here, which was really enjoyable and so much more Christmassy than Iceland, because there's this beautiful Christmas snow and everything that we sometimes don't have.
And I'm among those Icelanders who have always dreamed of having just one Christmas in Iceland and one New Year's Eve with the fireworks.
Wow, yes. New Year's Eve is something special.
Yes. So you've now been our Icelandic ambassador here in Canada for 4 years. Where do you expect life in the Foreign Service to take you next, and what are your ambitions for the future?
Well, the Icelandic Foreign Service, like most or maybe all, have this sort of way of sending one to one posting abroad, then another for 4 years each, roughly, and then back to the capital, to back home for 4 years. So our next move will be to Reykjavik, and we are looking forward to that. We've been away for 8 years now, and I suspect I will be working in the Ministry for Education for a few years, not education, foreign affairs, and then maybe one more posting. And if it was up to me, I'd gladly come back here, but unfortunately, it's unusual to be posted twice in the same country.
Well, we wouldn't want you to go home and be suspected of being a Canadian asset. Well, we hope that after your next stay back home in Iceland, that you get the second diplomatic posting of your dreams, because we're confident that Ottawa was your first. With that, we have a few minutes for questions, and I'll ask Bev. Bev, have we had some questions come in?
Yes, I've been watching the chat. So the first one we had was from Peter Norman from the Toronto Club, the Icelandic Canadian Club of Toronto, and he wanted to welcome you on behalf of their club. And we touched on this a little bit, but he was wondering if you could speak to the unique challenges in doing your important diplomatic work in light of the current environment, which has been difficult for everybody.
Well, yes. It's been quite a dramatic change for us, because we had to move the operation of the embassy into our home. So I'm mostly working from home now, but it's amazing how quickly everyone has adapted to using the computer instead of having personal meetings. And the remarkable thing is that in some ways we are even more effective. We don't have to drive around or travel around and spend time on that. We can be in contact with people over the internet, and that really works. And thanks for the question, Peter, and thanks for all the support to the embassy in the past. You've been a great help to us in Toronto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. It's certainly been a pleasure hearing your talk today as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we had a couple of comments. One was from Cindy Goodman, who can wave there, give us a little wave, from Wynyard. And also Judy Dixon was born and raised in Wynyard, and they both commented that they would love to have you in Wynyard and visiting the Vatnabig Club, and hope that can become a reality sometime when things get back to normal business. Indeed,
thank you so much. I would really like to do that, and that's certainly on my plan.
Good. We don't have anything else currently in the chat, so I don't know if anyone would like to raise a hand. We could try to see you here. We'd have to cruise through a couple of pages, but if there's anything else for our ambassador. Okay.
Well, while you're doing that, Bev, let me just point out that the Icelandic National League of North America is relaunching its INL Reads program online starting next weekend. INL Reads is a program intended to have members of the Icelandic community in North America share a common book to read during a particular year. This year, the plan is to look at Hannah Kent's book Burial Rites, which is the exciting story of the last executions in Iceland and the events that led up to it. I would add that Agnes Bardal Comac, Neil Bardal's aunt, paid the supreme compliment to that book when I asked her what was on her nightstand once. She said that reading Burial Rites when she was in her high 90s was the first time that she felt like she really understood the conditions in which her parents and grandparents had lived before coming to Canada. So it's a wonderful book, and I hope people can join that. I would also encourage people to go to the Icelandic National League's wonderful website, created by Matt Gaudet, called the URL is INLNA.org. And the most important reason to go there is that you will find links to local chapters of the Icelandic National League of North America. And I know that they would welcome your involvement if you're looking for a community of Icelandic North Americans and friends of Iceland to be part of. And there are also many wonderful links and news stories available at the INL of NA.org website. So do take those opportunities in. And Bev, have we got any additional questions?
We do. Former honorary consul in Toronto, Gail, has her hand up. So Gail, yes, would you like to raise a question? Please go ahead, unmute yourself.
So, Pétur, I wondered if you could make a little comment on the SNORA program, SNORA West and the SNORA program to Iceland, whether you feel those are important in making our relationship much closer.
Yes, of course. Hello, Gail. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, the SNORA programs, there's no doubt about that. They have been extremely important for the last decade or more. And there are such a great number of people who have experienced Iceland and Canada through these programs, and it's just wonderful. And I mean, these programs have been like the inspiration for me to work on the agreement with Canada that I mentioned before, the youth agreement.
Well, that would be terrific if that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Very great initiative. Thank you.
Okay, we have another question posted in the chat from Amy. My apologies, Amy, if I pronounce your last name incorrectly, Salvanir, who says most Icelanders are Indigenous, and there are several Indigenous groups in Greenland. What do you make of the climate change impacts on the traditional fishing heritage? The Heritage Museum at Siglufjörður and the Icelandic Immigration Center in Hofsós.
Indigenous people in Iceland.
Wonder, Amy, if you would like to speak to that question yourself, wherever you are. Sorry, I may not have related it correctly. Are you?
I'm assuming that Amy means that there were no people in Iceland other than a handful of Irish monks before the Icelandic people actually settled there. So the Icelanders are, in a sense, a first people in the land where they live.
Right. And in fact, they were also the first people in Greenland, because they were there before the Inuit people came from Canada. Yes, I'm not sure what the question really was.
Basically, your feelings regarding the climate change on traditional fishing heritage, or the fishing industry as it is currently in Iceland and Greenland, perhaps, and how the fishing industries of the two countries are dealing recently with climate change.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Well, the fishing industry is our second most important industry today. And our cod stock is now in its best shape that it's ever been in. So, and cod is the most important catch for us. There are certain species leaving our waters. Capelin is moving towards Greenland, and there are also species coming into our waters from the south. So, I mean, our fishing industry is in excellent shape and never better. and we are not really, I mean, I don't think we have a reason to be worried about it. We hope that we can maybe fish further north in the future. And we are also looking forward to new species that we can fish coming into our territories. For Greenland, the fishing industry is slowly being built up. They do have cod species, which is really the same cod as ours. They are also fishing for capelin, but the traditional hunting is getting more difficult in the north of Greenland. But these are quite technical things and difficult to go into them in details. But yeah, global warming will, of course, is a serious threat, because when the Greenlandic glacier melts, this will have an effect for all of us. And so we all have to do our best to try to slow these things down, and maybe, work on reversing this, what's happening.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone else would like to indicate, if you want to wave your hand, if you have a question that you'd like to relay to the ambassador?
Beverly, I have a question.
Yes, John.
Mr. Ambassador, Winnipeg has always had an important diplomatic posting from Iceland because of the population density of Western Icelanders. Is it possible that there might be a consulate in the maritime provinces? Are the maritime provinces becoming more important, not demographically, but economically, with Canada and Iceland?
Well, John, it's nice to meet you again. We have several consuls, honorary consuls in the United States, and we have our embassy in Washington. But I have not heard any talk about a specific consul in the United States to deal with our cousins there. In fact, our consulate in Winnipeg is expected to also maintain and grow relationships with our cousins in south of the border as well.
My question was about the maritime provinces, the Eastern Canada, Nova Scotia, Quebec, Prince Edward Islands, the Maritimes. Are they becoming important enough economically to justify a consulate like in Winnipeg?
No, I do not think so. We have honorary consuls in all the provinces of Canada, and we have only 4 professional consulates around the world, like I said, and one of them is in Canada, and I don't expect that we will open any more anytime soon.
Well, thank you. I'm mindful of the story of Cinderella, where the clock struck 12, and she had to leave the party at the peril of losing her shoes, and we're closing in on the time that we have booked in the Zoom room for this first All Things Icelandic. And so I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Ambassador Pétur Ásgeirsson for being here with us today. It has been wonderful to get to know you better and to have you introduce Iceland to the people of North America in this introductory All Things Icelandic. So thank you, Pétur. Thank you, Bev Arason-Gaudet, for helping with the technology and posing the questions towards the end. And I would like to thank all of you for attending and encourage you to follow the Icelandic National League website, to follow us on Facebook, if you will, and to keep your eyes open for the announcement of the next All Things Icelandic. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Bye now.
I would also like to thank you, Stefan, and the Icelandic National League of North America for having me. It was a great pleasure, and I want to congratulate you on All Things Icelandic. It's a great and wonderful idea. Thank you so much to all of you.